Well, good morning and welcome to Wake Up Wednesdays. Regina Clark here from Colorado Springs, and we are continuing on our journey and our lessons from the book, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And so I'm going to do quite a bit of reading to you today, so I'm just going to get right to it. The first one was, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life truer to myself. And then this one, of wishing they hadn't worked so hard. And so this one is a man who's in his 90s, and his name is John. And it's an interesting story. So he was pretty well to do, and he asked her one day, did she have a pink dress? And if not, he would buy her one. And she said, no, I happen to have a pink dress, thank you. And so they arranged to go out on this date, and he was all dressed up, and he was a perfect gentleman, and she was just fulfilling a request. And then she saw at this table there were four other men, and she had overheard them on the phone earlier in a conversation, and he was just saying, how lucky he was and all that. So obviously he wanted to show her off as part of just a fun and humor. And so anyway, they had been to the restaurant that day. She had met his friends, and it was all in good humor and fun. And then here, after the outing, she said it absolutely delighted him, but it exhausted him as well. The energy of dying people is so weak that a small outing is like working an 80-hour week lifting bricks. It completely drains them. Family and friends often don't realize how their well-intended visits can exhaust sick people. When they are in their last week or so, visits of more than 5 or 10 minutes can become hard work for the patient, yet this is usually when they're bombarded by visitors and everyone coming. And I just want to say the same thing about when someone loses someone, that they're inundated already with their own grief and their own loss. And even though everyone wants to show up to support, sometimes it can be super draining for the person who is left. And so I think, not that it's not important that people are there, but it probably becomes more important over time that they're supported in those first years and milestones and all the things. So anyway, just a side note. So they were sitting together one afternoon and just really grateful that they had been out to lunch, because she said he wouldn't be leaving the house again and he was deteriorating very quickly. So they were sitting out, and he said, I wish I hadn't worked so hard, Bronnie. What a stupid fool I was. From the other lounge chair on the balcony, I looked across at him. He needed no encouragement to continue. I worked too damn hard, and now I'm a lonely, dying man. The worst part is that I've been lonely for the whole of my retirement, and I didn't need to be. I listened as he told me the whole story. John and Margaret had raised 5 children, 4 of whom now had children of their own. The other one had died in his early 30s. When all the children were adults and gone from the home, Margaret had asked John to retire. They were both fit and healthy and had enough money behind them to retire as well. He always said, well, we might need more. Margaret replied each time that they could sell their huge, now almost empty house and buy something more suitable, freeing up more money. For 15 years, this battle went on between them while he kept working. Margaret was lonely and longed to discover their partnership again without children or work. For years, she devoured travel brochures suggesting different countries and regions to visit. John shared the desire to travel and was open to wherever Margaret suggested. Unfortunately, he also enjoyed the status that work gave him. He told me he didn't particularly like the work itself, just the role it gave him in society and among his friends. The chase of closing a deal had also become a bit of an addiction. One evening, with Margaret in tears begging him to finally retire, he looked at this beautiful woman and realized that not only was she desperately lonely for his company, but they were both older people now. This wonderful woman had waited so patiently for him to retire. Looking at her, she was still as beautiful as the day he had met her, But it was the first time John considered that they weren't going to live forever. Although petrified for reasons he could not now justify, he agreed to retire. Margaret had jumped up and hugged him, her tears switching from sadness to joy, but the smile didn't last long, disappearing the minute he added, "in one more year." At that time, there was a new deal being negotiated in the company, and he wanted to see it through. She had waited 15 years for him to retire. Surely she could wait one more. It was a compromise, but one she reluctantly agreed to. Having dreamt of this time for years, things started to become real for his beloved wife. She made plans. She was on the phone to the travel agent regularly. Each night as he wandered in, she would be waiting for him with dinner prepared as they ate at the table that once accommodated their whole family. She shared her thoughts and ideas with great excitement. John was starting to warm to the idea of retirement, although he still insisted on seeing the 12 months through. With 4 months gone since he agreed to retire and 8 still to go, Margaret began feeling queasy. At first it was a bit of nausea, but after almost a week it hadn't passed. So she made an appointment to the doctor, and then they decided that they needed to run more tests, and the following week her discomfort increased and the pain told them something was wrong. They just hadn't suspected how wrong. Margaret was dying. We spend so much time making plans for the future, often depending on things happening at a later date to assure our happiness or assuming we have all the time in the world. Sorry. When all we ever have is today. It wasn't difficult to understand the deep regrets that John was living with. I understand how people can love their work, and there's no need to feel guilt in loving work. I love my work too, despite the sadness that often accompanies it. Margaret was there, she was supportive and loving, and I wasn't there for her. She was a lot of fun too. We would have had such a good time traveling together. Margaret died 3 months before John was due to retire, though he had retired by then due to her health. So he finally stopped working so he could be with her. John shared how his retirement had been plagued with guilt ever since. Even though he was able to come to a certain place of acceptance about his mistake, as he called it, he longed to be traveling and laughing with Margaret. I think I was scared. Yes, I was. I was petrified. My role had come to define me in a way. Of course, now as I sit here dying, I see that just being a good person is more than enough in life. Why do we spend so much on the material world to validate us? John thought out loud, his random sentences filled with sadness for both past and future generations who wanted everything, basing their importance on what they owned and what they did, rather than on who they were in their hearts. There's nothing wrong with wanting a better life, don't get me wrong, he said. It's just that the chase for more and the need to be recognized through our achievements and belongings can hinder us from the real things, like time with those we love, time doing the things we love ourselves, and balance. It's probably all about balance, really, isn't it? Looking across at me with a sad smile, he told me, "If I can leave any good in this world besides my family, I leave these words. Don't work too hard. Try to maintain balance. Don't make work your whole life." John passed away not long after that night. Although I didn't know it then, his words were to be repeated to me time and time again by others that I cared for. He made his point. It was one I would never forget. And so that's what we have for you today. Take care of yourself and remember, work, life, play, balance. I once heard it said, 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours of work, and 8 hours of play or relaxation or rest or enjoyment. And so I think that's a good rule of thumb to split up our 8 hour day and to have balance, right? So that we, once again, the idea is that we want to live with no regrets. So until next time, have an amazing week and take care of yourself and don't work too hard.